Welcome to Behind the Lens. This is an ongoing conversation about all things dealing with film in the city of Eugene. We have a wonderful guest today. It's my pleasure to introduce Richard Herskowitz, who is right now affiliated with the University of Eugene, but has had a wonderful career going back decades, dealing with film in all its manifestations. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
All right, just as a point to start, you are the director of Cinema Pacific.
Correct.
Which is a festival of films from the Pacific Rim, including the United States.
That's right, especially the west coast of the United States.
Right, and that's the Pacific Rim. Okay. Right. One of the things I'd like to start talking about is the difference, and you have experience on both sides, between film festivals and film societies.
Happy to talk about that.
So how do you make that distinction?
Well, I used to run a film society. I ran the Cornell Cinema Film Society in Ithaca, New York. It was part of Cornell University. I did that from 1982 to 94. That was kind of the tail end of the Film Society era. I would say from the late 60s to the late 70s, the mid 80s, film societies were flourishing in the United States and around the world. And these were places where alternative film was shown outside of commercial movie theaters, and where people were introducing people to classics, foreign films, documentaries, films outside the mainstream. One of the major campus film societies was Cornell Cinema, and I should tell that story about that. I ran that for 12 years, but Cornell Cinema is where I got my own film education as a kid. My parents were school teachers, and they would summer, when they had summer vacations in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell University, and they would drop me off at night at Cornell Cinema, where I was exposed to Godard, Fellini, Truffaut, Bergman, Humphrey Bogart, the Marx Brothers. It blew my mind. What blew my mind especially was the conversations that would follow these films, that my parents' friends and then me joining my parents' friends would talk about the more controversial films, like Godard's Weekend.
Yes.
And it was fascinating to me that film could incite this kind of conversation and thought, and that got me hooked.
Well, I think that's kind of where we want to go, and if you ask the question, what is film for? You have a variety of answers that you could give to that. Film can be entertainment,
right?
It can be a babysitter,
yes,
or it can be a spiritual enhancement of your own life.
Right, right. Like you say, I mean, I think film can be many things. I think maybe you just said about the deeper spiritual purpose of film. My sense of the deepest purpose that film has is to help us experiment with the world, to reimagine the world. The motion picture medium takes pieces of everyday life, pieces of reality, the reality around us that we tend to think of as immutable, as fixed, even oppressive, and shows us that it can be reshaped, recut, reimagined, re-edited, transformed, and you can imagine a different kind of reality. I think that's the great liberatory potential of cinema that some of the people at the beginning of the century who got excited about film, Dziga Vertov, Walter Benjamin. Anyway, this is what excites me. It's why I feel like the deepest purpose of film is to get us to think experimentally about reality. That's my sense.
And sometimes when people go to the movies with the expectation of being lulled into some sort of soporific state, your position is that the movies can wake you up.
Absolutely. And I feel like whether they know it or not, there is a deep level which people are drawn to the movies because of the ways we experience reality being transformed. For example, I mean, even, you know, it's common that we watch the powerful brought to their knees in films. I mean, that's just, we watch people playing with power relations. We often we'll see in narratives men acting like women, women acting like men, like I said, the rich being brought down, brought low. This kind of carnivalesque, you know, experience of seeing the normal social power relations altered, transformed, is something that touches people very deeply, and it's part of what drives them to the movies, even when they're telling themselves they're just going in order to turn their brains off and relax and bliss out.
Yes. And do you have thoughts about the distinctions inherent between the narrative film or the commercial film, the documentary, and perhaps the avant-garde?
No, I do. In a way, I feel like it's all a continuum. And I'll say, for example, I mean, I feel like every film is at some level a documentary. We could say that The Hunger Games is a documentary about an actress named Jennifer Lawrence, who is playing the role of Katniss, the protagonist, and she is just off the screen. We can't see it, but there are a bunch of cameras and equipment and a crew that is focused. You know, you can look at a narrative and see its documentary components. That's often when we teach people to look at film critically. They can not only follow the story, but they are watching the making of the story, what's not included in the frame. In a way, I think that they're looking at film in a documentary fashion, a narrative film in a documentary way. So I feel like all films are documentary to an extent. I think all films are experimental. Like I said, all movies to some extent are experimenting with pieces of reality. So I do think it's all kind of a continuum and a matter of perspective, how you choose to look at the movie.
Yes. It would also be true that even a documentary has a narrative.
Yes.
You know, because a documentary is probably a propaganda film in some way of looking at it.
Absolutely. Even the films that call themselves cinema verite, cinema truth, again, they're being very selective. Just they choose when to cut, what not to include in the frame. That is representing a certain point of view. The people who are in the film acting out their everyday life are acting out their everyday life. They are playing the parts of themselves. I mean, that they know very well a camera is photographing them. And although they may be able to act more and more as if it's not there, at some level they are very conscious that they are performing. So again, being aware that all movies have these documentary and these narrative components is very helpful at being able to be critically aware of what you're watching all the time. I think it's a very healthy thing to be.
So what happened after you left the Cornell Cinema?
Well, okay, so I guess I'd said that as a kid I was exposed to high-quality cinema and a range of films from the past and from other countries, and it broadened my horizons, and I got lucky enough to actually get a job, my first job out of graduate school. In graduate school I had been, let me just step back and say, I alternated in my 20s between wanting to be a filmmaker and wanting to be a film scholar. And most what I discovered more and more was that there were all these extraordinary filmmakers out there I was becoming aware of who were not getting recognized, not being seen. And I started showing them. Even as I was a graduate student, I would set up screenings to show works by international and experimental filmmakers. And I discovered, you know what, these filmmakers who are being neglected are far greater than I could ever be as a filmmaker. I am very good at introducing people to high-quality cinema, putting on shows, contextualizing the films. That's when I discovered that I'm not going to be a filmmaker, I'm not going to be a film teacher primarily, I'm going to be a programmer and a presenter of films. And then, so my first job managed as a programmer was being hired to direct Cornell Cinema, the place that I had been, as a kid, exposed to art films. So I was very lucky, and I did that for 12 years.
And you tell me that you programmed 500 movies a year.
A year. For 12 years, I programmed 500 movies a year. It seems hard to believe, but I still can't believe it now. But I had like 4 different theaters. On weekends, we used all of them. During the week, 1 or 2 theaters, but again, we would show a different film every night. And we were running different series. Monday night might be a series about a great director. Tuesday night, a national cinema. Wednesday night, a genre or a theme. You know, this was the tail end of the Film Society era when, again, a lot of campuses had them. Cornell Cinema is still going on, but what began to supplant film societies more and more were film festivals. And I was hired away from Cornell Cinema by the University of Virginia, which had just started the Virginia Film Festival. And my first reaction was, wait a second, I'm going to be going from showing films 46 weeks a year, every night of the week. There was a few weeks we took off. To doing a 5-day festival every year, and I was going to be paid full-time. In fact, my salary, a higher salary. It seemed to me like it was going to be a paid vacation. But I discovered that spending the entire year coming up with the programs, basically almost like a year's worth of programs that we're going to show in this intensive 5-day period, and that's synchronizing them and coordinating all the pieces of it. For some reason, it's an even harder job. I still don't understand why. But I moved from film societies into film festivals in 1994, and I've been doing film festivals ever since. The Virginia Film Festival I did from 94 to 2008.
So that's 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah. So during that time, you had many famous people come to your festival.
That's right. Yeah, that's something that I discovered. I think at Cornell Cinema, the only famous person I ever brought there was Christopher Reeve, who was a Cornell alumnus. But I discovered, my first year at the Virginia Film Festival, I had as guests Roger Ebert, I had Andre Gregory for my dinner with Andre, I had Jules Pfeiffer, the cartoonist, I brought Griffin Dunn, the actor, and the press was absolutely vicious. They said, who is this new guy who's the head of the Virginia Film Festival? He's not bringing us stars anymore. These people I just mentioned, to me, were big names. What are they talking about? But in the years before I'd been there, the Virginia Film Festival had brought Robert Mitchum, Gregory Peck, Jimmy Stewart, and there was a level of expectation. What I discovered is that there had to be a headliner every year, just like a big budget motion picture or even an independent feature needs a headliner in order to attract the financing, attract attention. The Virginia Film Festival audience was used to a big name guest. I learned my lesson quickly, and I started bringing, oh my God, I mean Sandra Bullock, Nicolas Cage, Anthony Hopkins, Vanessa Redgrave, Jason Robards. Over the years, I would say the toughest part of my job was landing that big name who was going to be the headliner of the festival. And I still do that at my other film festival at Houston, where we brought Robert Redford and Tilda Swinton. It's tough, but it's just part of in a way, I try not to make the star and everybody's just celebrity fixation overwhelm all the quality stuff in the festival, and well, it's not easy. Yeah,
well, looking back, referring to what you and I have talked about the purpose of film and the capacity of film for the viewer
Yes, yes, yes.
to make the film their own,
Yes.
That's a wonderful and noble enterprise.
Right.
And why should Robert Mitchum be more important than the viewer?
Right. Well, I have to say that the stars that I have generally gone after have been, there are a lot of them in the business are as committed to this liberating potential of film as I am. And actually, for example, I was able to attract Isabella Rossellini and Robert Redford and Tilda Swinton to my festival in Houston in recent years. But they are evangelical about the power of films to open people's minds to alternative ways of living. And I mean, Tilda Swinton has her own film festival she's created called the Ballerina Ballroom of Dreams. Robert Redford, of course, started Sundance. Isabella Rossellini loves to make experimental movies on the side. All I'd have to do to attract them is to say, we really want to feature, for example, with Isabella Rossellini, we want to feature the works of your father, Roberto Rossellini. Would you come? With Tilda Swinton, I said, you know, I want to show works by you and about your mentor, Derek Jarman, a great director, and she responded very positively instantly. So anyway, stars, I've always seen, okay, people have this fascination with them. Luckily, there are a lot of them out there that are very devoted, and they respond to invitations from film festivals that they know are going to be serving their larger purpose.
How can you identify those people, though?
Oh, I'm always like reading interviews. I'm trying to find, I'm following what the stars are doing and what they care about. And when I see that they have this interest, then I will pursue them and say, look, we want to, you know, we're not asking you. This is what happened. I remember when I brought Anthony Hopkins to the Virginia Film Festival, and he came in and he started out in his usual mode that he expected to be at a film festival, and he was just, you know, ready to talk to the press and hype his latest film. That's what he thought he was doing. His people hadn't really, in this case, kind of prepared him, and he quickly discovered this was a different kind of film festival, that there were students there that he was going to be meeting with, that people. We had Roger Ebert as an interviewer, and Ebert was going to do a very in-depth interview. And he just quickly realized, oh, this is, he started becoming himself and sharing deeper aspects of his concerns and his mission as an actor. And it was wonderful to behold. I mean, the same thing with Vanessa Redgrave. I mean, I remember, again, she actually knew, she was very excited about coming. There was a party that opening night, and she was the last person to leave the party. She just wanted to talk to everybody. So, yeah. So
did you find that you could get these people to come by talking to them directly, or did you have to deal with agents?
Sometimes with agents. It's always a kind of a fascinating thing. Let's say like with Sandra Bullock, I did reach her actually through her sister. There was a connection, and she came. In this case, we said initially that we would help her promote her next Miss Congeniality movie, and so she thought she was coming in this case for promotional reasons for her new film. But again, when she came and she discovered she was at the University of Virginia and she was meeting with acting students and professors, her publicists were had said to me, for example, you've got 10 minutes with Sandra with this discussion with students, and then she's going to be out of there. So at the end of 10 minutes of interviewing her, I turned to the audience and said, I'm sorry, but Ms. Bullock is going to have to leave. And she just took she said, what are you, I'm not going anywhere. And we ended up talking for another 45 minutes. Anyway, I could tell all kinds of stories like that. Again, when in many cases I attracted them to the festival by letting them know how special the situation were, how we really wanted to bring out what they really cared about. And other times I got them there, and it's when they came they realized this was not a normal festival situation.
So it was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, during that festival in 2007, you were given an award as the Tourism Person of the Year by Charlottesville.
Yes.
And what was your experience of being feted?
Yeah, that one was something that was a bit of a surprise, but I had, just like I do here in Eugene, I really believe that the festival is something that is both serving the local population by bringing them the level of international culture that you would expect in a major city, but at the same time also attracting people from the outside, and you're actually helping tourism, you're actually helping the economy of the city. Obviously in this city, the Bach Festival is a major attraction. I've been working on making Cinema Pacific more and more of an attraction. There are certain special things about Eugene and the University of Oregon that Cinema Pacific is heightening. Anyway, in Charlottesville, the Virginia Film Festival, over the years I was there, became more and more of attraction to out-of-town visitors.
Yeah. Well, after you left Virginia, you moved to Houston, and you still do the Houston Festival.
Yeah. You know what? I never moved to Houston. What happened was that when I left the Virginia Film Festival, I was hired to be the artistic director of the Houston Cinema Arts Festival, and I was also hired here to start Cinema Pacific and teach arts and administration at this university. I chose to move to Eugene. This was in 2008 because my wife was hired as the director of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, and she had actually followed me to Charlottesville when I was hired to run the Virginia Film Festival. It was my turn to move where she was hired, and so I convinced the Houston Cinema Arts Society to let me be the artistic director from a distance. And I've done this now for 7 years. I Skype once a week. I go to Houston every now and then. I'm probably in Houston a total of 6 weeks over the whole year, but I program that from afar.
Well, congratulations on bringing that one off.
Yeah, I didn't know, but it's actually a great experience, and it benefits. It's so radically different from Cinema Pacific. At Cinema Pacific, I work with students. There's just me, there's Larissa Ennis and Patty Jo Angelini, who work for academic extension of the university. We're the regular staff here, but otherwise all the staff are students. This was an experiment, that this was going to be a teaching festival where students were going to play a lot of the administrative and publicity and coordinating roles of the film festival under my supervision. So it was a teaching festival. The Houston Cinema Arts Festival is a much bigger, glitzier event. There's a full-time staff in Houston. Like I said, big movie stars come, like Redford, and it's got a lot more money. What I try to do is, that festival is in November. This festival, Cinema Pacific, is in April. I try often to balance them. I bring some of the same talent to both places sometimes. There's all kinds of ways I try to keep this in balance.
They complement.
They complement each other, yes.
Yeah. The other thing that you are president of is the Robert Flaherty Film Seminar. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that was, I'm no longer the president of that, I was, and I was very involved in the Robert Flaherty Film Seminar, especially through the 80s. The greatest programming experience of my life was programming the Flaherty Film Seminar in 1987. The Flaherty Film Seminar was started in 1954, which is actually the year I was born, and by the widow of Robert Flaherty, the documentary filmmaker. Her name was Frances Flaherty.
And just remind us the famous movies that Robert Flaherty...
Yeah, Robert Flaherty had made Nanook of the North and Moana and Man of Aaron, the great documentaries of the 1930s. And, but he was a visionary. He had a vision very similar to the one that I had been describing, of film as an experimental medium. He believed that all film was about exploration. He was himself an explorer, and he saw film as a tool for exploration. And Frances Flaherty, his wife, took his theory, his ethic of filmmaking, and made it the foundation of this annual seminar in which about 100 people would gather, mostly filmmakers, but also film scholars, and watch film intensively. I programmed that in 1987. I had a captive audience for 7 days, and I programmed films for them morning, noon, and night, and I never had a more satisfying experience. And out of that, I was so committed to the organization. I got on the board, became president, and I still am very committed to them.
Yeah, and that's a festival that moves its locations. It happens at different places?
Yeah, actually, yes, but usually it's in upstate New York. It's some campus that's a retreat and isolated so that people can live, breathe, eat movies together for a full week.
All right, well, we're getting down to the end of this particular interview. And I would like to give you the opportunity to say again, what are movies for?
Movies are to help us reimagine reality, to transform the world, and to open our eyes to new possibilities.
Well, this has been a wonderful event, this conversation. We're going to have an additional interview with you about your work specifically at Cinema Pacific.
Great.
So that I hope that our viewers will look for that and come back. I don't know, is there anyone you want to say hello to?
I'd like to kind of thank my wife, Jill Hartz, for having given me the pretext to come live in Eugene. Yes, I've come to love.
Actually, I met you when I met Jill at a Rotary meeting.
That's right.
And she told me about this husband she had.
Yeah. Well, it's great that there is this film culture in this town. Places like the Bijou, your Behind the Lens series, Tom, part of what makes Eugene a pretty special place for film lovers.
Thank you. We'll be back with you on another date. Thank you.